Hi there! Welcome to Akilimo. Akilimo is a service that can teach you how to grow your cassava in a smart way. That is why we say, we know cassava. In this video, we will teach you how to use our printable guides to get tailored fertilizer recommendations for your cassava farm in 6 easy steps. In these 6 steps, you will learn 1. The importance of good agronomic practices. 2. How to choose the right fertilizer types. 3. How to obtain the recommended fertilizer rate. 4. How to evaluate if fertilizer use is profitable. 5. When to apply the fertilizer. 6. How to apply fertilizer correctly. In order to receive tailored fertilizer recommendations for your cassava field, you will need to provide the following information. 1. Your location. 2. Your planting date. 3. Your current yield. 4. The price of fertilizer. 5. The expected price of your cassava roots. 6. The size of your cassava field. You will learn how to use the Akilimo printable guide for tailored fertilizer advice with the accompanying farmer's worksheet and the flyer with recommended fertilizer rates. Let's get started. Step 1. Apply good agronomic practices. You must make sure you apply good agronomic practices before you consider investing in fertilizer. Else you will not benefit from the use of fertilizer in your cassava field. Practice good land preparation and weed control. We recommend you watch our video on 6 steps to cassava weed management and planting practices. Always use improved varieties of cassava that are high yielding and disease tolerant. Make sure you obtain disease-free cassava cuttings from a certified source. Plant your cassava in rows that are 1 meter apart, and within the row, space erect cassava varieties at 80 centimeters from plant to plant, and for branching varieties, space them at 1 meter from plant to plant. This information is also summarized in the farmer's worksheet. At this point, the farmer's worksheet also requires you to specify the area of your field in acres. This is box A. The field area will be used in the cost-benefit analysis under step 4. As an example, let's assume the area of the field is half an acre. We will now move on to step 2, choosing the right fertilizer types. To understand how to choose the right fertilizer types, you need to know the most important nutrients and how they can contribute to cassava growth. Cassava requires 3 important nutrients to grow. The first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen supports the growth of the stems and leaves. It is represented by the letter N. The second nutrient is phosphorus, which provides energy needed for growth. It is represented by the letter P. And finally, potassium, which helps the plant in bulking the storage roots. Potassium is represented by the letter K. In some cases, you will find all these 3 nutrients in one fertilizer type. They are typically labeled as NPK with specific ratios. The most common ones are NPK 15 to 15 to 15, NPK 17 to 17 to 17, and NPK 20 to 10 to 10. Other fertilizer types will only have 1 or 2 of these nutrients. You need to keenly observe the labels on the fertilizer bag. Examples are urea, diammonium phosphate or DAP, and muriate of potash or MOP. The first number always refers to the nitrogen content. Nitrogen is found in all NPK fertilizers, in urea, and in DAP. NPK fertilizers also contain phosphorus, as does DAP. And potassium is part of all NPK fertilizer blends as well as MOP. Cassava requires all 3 of these nutrients, but the amounts depend on the fertility of the soil and the planting date. And cassava does not require all nutrients at the same time. That is why it is advisable you use a combination of at least 2 fertilizer types rather than a single complex fertilizer type. In this video, we will focus on a combination of 2 commonly available fertilizers. urea, and NPK 15 to 15 to 15. You can find out the price of urea and NPK 15 to 15 to 15 from your local agro dealer. In the farmer's worksheet, Box B and C are fields for entering the price of 2 fertilizers. You will need this later to check the profitability of fertilizer use. As an example, let's assume urea fertilizer costs 7,000 naira per bag of 50 kg and NPK 15 to 15 to 15 costs 8,000 naira per bag of 50 kg. We can now move on to step 3. Obtaining the recommended fertilizer rate. Deciding the amount of fertilizer to apply is the most difficult step. The amount of fertilizer to apply depends first of all on the fertility of your soil. The best way to know your soil fertility is to check what yield you typically obtain in your farm without applying fertilizer. This is your current cassava yield. Think of how cassava performed in your field in the past and compare the size of a typical rootstock harvested from your field to the rootstocks shown in these pictures. In a field with a low yield, you will harvest less than 3 tons per acre. In a field with a normal yield, you will harvest between 3 and 6 tons per acre. This is the most common yield observed by smallholder cassava growers. In a field with a medium yield, you will harvest between 6 and 9 tons per acre. In a field with a high yield, you harvest between 9 and 12 tons per acre. And in a field with a very high yield, you harvest more than 12 tons per acre. Such fields are rare and are typically recently cleared forest fallows or fields that have received very high amounts of fertilizer or organic inputs. For example, say you think your field gives a normal yield. If you have a good crop stand of 5,000 plants per acre, and every cassava plant provides on average 1 kilogram of storage roots, then your yield will be 5,000 times 1 kilogram, which equals 5 tons per acre. This between 3 and 6 tons per acre, and therefore a normal yield. Most smallholder farmers in Nigeria obtain yields between 3 and 6 tons per acre. The higher your yield is, the more productive your soil is. Productive soils contain a lot of nutrients, which means that you need to supply less nutrients from fertilizer. Knowing your current yield is very important to make a good decision on the amount of fertilizer you need to apply. But that is not all. The amount of fertilizer to apply also depends on where you are located and on your planting date. Let's consider your location first. In our printable tools, we require you to specify your local government area. Akilimo uses this to look up information about the typical soils in your area and to calculate how much nutrients they contain. Based on these soil characteristics, we then calculate how much fertilizer is required. In addition, we also consider the month in which you planted. Together with your location, that allows us to predict the amount of rainfall your crop will receive and how your crop will grow. This allows us to calculate how much your crop can benefit from fertilizer application. Your crop yield will only increase if your crop receives sufficient rainfall at the right time. We are now ready to show you how to use the Akilimo flyer to look up the recommended fertilizer rate. The flyer with the recommended rates can be downloaded from the Akilimo website, or you can consult our dashboard. Visit www.akilimo.org. Remember, you will need to know your current yield class and whether your yield without fertilizer is typically low, normal, medium, high, or very high. Next, you need to consider your state and local government area. And lastly, the recommended rates will depend on your planting month. So how does this work? Let's look at an example. There are flyers for every major cassava growing state. Let's assume as an example that you are located in Benue State, you will then need to consider in which local government area you are located. For this example, let's select Boko LGA. Next, we need to know in what month you planted cassava. As an example, let's assume cassava was planted in May. And lastly, we need to know the current yield. Remember, Akilimo considers 5 yield classes, from low to very high. For this example, let's assume the field typically gives a normal yield between 3 and 6 tons per acre. Akilimo provides a flyer that contains recommended fertilizer rates for your state. In this flyer, you will find maps and tables that specify recommendations for each LGA, month of planting, and yield class. You will now need to look up the right numbers. So let's look at our example, where we assumed we are located in Boko, Benue State, and we will plant in May in a field with a normal yield. In the flyer, you will find maps for Benue State. The maps have different color schemes indicating the amounts of each fertilizer required and the expected yield increase. The state is marked at the top, as well as the yield level. Make sure you turn to the right page for the yield level of your field. In our example, a normal yield. Now find the Boko LGA on the first map and observe the green color. Use the color legend. The intensity of the green color allows you to now obtain the recommended rate of urea for Boko. This is 60 kg of urea per acre. Now do the same on the middle map. The red color intensity allows you to obtain the recommended NPK rate for Boko. This is 100 kg of NPK per acre. Now repeat this again on the last map. The blue color intensity allows you to obtain an estimate of the expected yield response. If you apply 60 kg of urea and 100 kg of NPK per acre, you can expect your cassava yield to increase by 7 tons per acre. If you prefer, you can also obtain the same information from a lookup table. Make sure you use the correct table and mind the header. For our example, we require the table for a field of normal yield and for a cassava field planted in May. In the LGA column, look for your LGA. For our example, we selected Boko. You will now see the same numbers as earlier found from the maps. The recommended urea rate is 60 kg per acre. The recommended NPK rate is 100 kg per acre. And the expected yield response is 7 tons per acre. Let's now go back to the farmer's worksheet. In step 3, we can indicate these values because we will need them to verify the profitability of fertilizer. In box D, provide the recommended urea rate obtained from the flyer. For our example, this is 60 kg per acre. In box E, provide the recommended NPK rate. For our example, this is 100 kg per acre. In box F, provide the expected yield response. This is 7 tons per acre. At this point, you also need to provide the expected sale price of cassava roots in your area. Use your experience and make sure you provide a realistic price that you commonly obtain at the market where you sell your produce. This is the last piece of information needed to conduct a cost-benefit analysis. Let's assume as an example that you expect to sell cassava roots at 17,000 naira per ton. You have now successfully obtained the recommended fertilizer rates required for 1 acre of land in your local government. But how do you convert these to the required amounts of fertilizer needed for your field? In our example, we will grow cassava in a field of half an acre. To obtain the amounts of fertilizer recommended for your field, simply multiply the size of your field with the recommended rates for 1 acre. Here is how to do this calculation. Let's start with urea. The recommended rate is 60 kg per acre. The quantity needed for your field is 0.5 acre times 60 kg per acre. That's 30 kg of urea. Let's now do the same for NPK. the recommended rate is 100 kg per acre. Again, we just multiply 0.5 acre times 100 kg per acre equals 50 kg of NPK. And we can also calculate how much additional cassava roots we can expect to produce. 0.5 acre times 7 tons per acre equals 3.5 tons. We can expect to harvest an additional 3.5 tons of cassava roots from our field of half an acre. We now know how much fertilizer to apply and how much additional cassava roots we can expect to produce. But is this profitable? To answer this, we need to do a cost-benefit analysis. This is step 4, performing a cost-benefit analysis. Before investing in fertilizer, it is wise to evaluate if you will turn a profit. The revenue you will make from the increase in yield must be larger than the cost of the fertilizer. The recommended rates provided in Step 3 are calculated based on the common prices of fertilizer and cassava roots in Nigeria. You must confirm profitability using the fertilizer prices in your local area and your expected cassava root price. Remember, in Step 2, we already obtained the prices of fertilizer from a local agro-dealer. In the worksheet, we recorded a price of 7,000 Naira per bag of urea and 8,000 Naira per bag of NPK 15 to 15 to 15. And as part of Step 3, we recorded the expected sales price of cassava roots. In our example, we assumed the price of 17,000 Naira per ton of cassava roots. To calculate profit from fertilizer, you need to compare your expected gross value increase with the total cost of fertilizer. Let's start by calculating the expected gross value increase per acre. To calculate this, you need to multiply the root price in Naira per ton with the expected yield increase in tons per acre. Next, you need to calculate the cost of fertilizer per acre. For each fertilizer, multiply the fertilizer price in Naira per kilogram with the recommended application rate in kilogram per acre. Then sum these up. The worksheet helps you make these calculations. Let's go back to our example to show how it works. The worksheet provides a table that takes you through the calculations step by step. It's important to practice this so that you learn how to do this yourself for your own field. By understanding costs and benefits, you will be able to make better decisions on fertilizer investments in your cassava farm. First, we will calculate the increase in production. This is the extra amount of cassava roots that you can expect to produce in your field due to fertilizer application. The middle column provides the calculation to perform. You must multiply the value in box A with the value in box F. Box A contains the area of your field. Remember, in our example, this was half an acre. Box F contains the expected yield response. This was 7 tons per acre. We now multiply both values. 0.5 times 7 equals 3.5. The expected increase in production is 3.5 tons. We note this down in the table. Let's move on. Next, we will calculate the increase in gross revenue. We need to multiply the values H and G. Value H is the result of our previous calculation. The increase in production, which equals 3.5 tons. Value G we entered earlier under Step 3. It is the expected sale price of cassava roots, which we assumed will be 17,000 Naira per ton. Let's perform the calculation now. 3.5 times 17,000 equals 59,500. The expected increase in gross revenue is 59,500 Naira. This is the value of the extra produce we expect to get due to fertilizer application. We note this down in the table. Let's move on. Next, we will calculate the amount of urea to apply. To do so, we need to multiply values A and D. Box A contains the area of the field. Remember, in our example, this was half an acre. Box D contains the recommended urea application rate. This was 60 kg per acre. Let's perform the calculation now. 0.5 times 60 equals 30. The recommended amount of urea to apply is 30 kg. We note this down in the table. Let's continue. We need to do the same thing to calculate the amount of NPK to apply. But now we need to multiply value A with value E. Box A is still the area of the field, 0.5 acre. Box E is the recommended rate of NPK 15 to 15 to 15, which was 100 kg per acre. So now we multiply 0.5 times 100. That is 50. The amount of NPK 15 to 15 to 15 to apply is 50 kg. We note this down in the table. Remember, we had already shown earlier how to convert recommended fertilizer rates per acre to the amounts needed for your field. Let's go on to the next row in the table. We will now calculate the cost of urea. To do so, we need to multiply values J and B and divide by 50. Value K is the amount of NPK to apply, which we calculated earlier. Box C contains the price of a bag of NPK 15 to 15 to 15. In our example, this was 8,000 naira. We now multiply 50 times 8,000 and divide by 50. This equals 8,000. So the cost of NPK fertilizer is 8,000 naira. Let's move on. Next, we need to calculate the total cost of fertilizer. This is easy. We just need to add up values L and M. Value L is the cost of urea. This was 4,200 naira. And value M is the cost of NPK. This was 8,000 naira. 4,200 plus 8,000 equals 12,200. So the total cost of fertilizer is 12,200 naira. We note this down in the table. We are almost through. Next, we will calculate the profit from fertilizer. To do so, we need to subtract value N from value I. Value I is the increase in gross revenue. We calculated this to be 59,500 naira. Value N is the cost of fertilizer. This is 12,200 naira. 59,500 minus 12,200 equals 47,300. So the expected profit from fertilizer is 47,300 naira. This is the money we can expect to make from fertilizer. The last thing to calculate is the benefit-cost ratio. This will help you decide if your expected profit is large enough to justify investing. We need to divide value I by value N. Value I is the increase in gross revenue, 59,500 naira. And value N is the total cost of fertilizer, 12,200 naira. 59,500 divided by 12,200 equals about 4.9. We note this value down in the table. A value of 4.9 is very good. This means that for every naira invested in fertilizer, you can expect to get almost 5 naira in return. The cost-benefit analysis is now complete. Let's look at the results again. Is fertilizer use profitable in our example? First, what is the expected increase in gross revenue? This is the value of the additional 3.5 tons of roots we expect to produce due to fertilizer use. This was 59,500 naira in our example. And what is the total cost of fertilizer? This is the combined cost of the amounts of urea and NPK 15 to 15 to 15 that we need to apply. In our example, this is 12,200 naira. So what is the expected profit from fertilizer? The difference is 47,300 naira. This is the extra money we expect to make due to our investment in fertilizer. But this value is an estimation. It may be smaller or larger depending on how you manage your crop, depending on the weather in the upcoming season, and depending on the price of cassava at the time of harvest. Whether this expected profit is large enough depends on your risk appetite. Your risk appetite means to what extent you can afford to make investments and like to take risks. To get an idea of this, consider how often you currently invest in new farm products or technologies. Have you perhaps tried out new herbicide products? Or invested in new farm implements? Or perhaps purchased seeds of a new crop variety? Farmers who invest often in new products or technologies like taking risks. And this usually means that they can afford to make investments that do not pay off. The other way around, farmers who do not invest often need to be more sure about how profitable an investment needs to be before they decide to go ahead. So the lower your risk appetite, the larger the expected profit margin must be to justify an investment in fertilizer. The Akilimo tools consider three possible answers: very rarely, sometimes, and often. If you answer very rarely, then this means you do not like taking risks. You would therefore only invest if your expected profit is very large compared to the cost you need to incur. We recommend you only invest in fertilizer if your expected gross value increase is at least 3 times larger than the total cost of fertilizer. That means your benefit cost ratio should be at least 3. For every naira invested, you expect to get at least 3 naira in return. If you answer sometimes, then you accept some risk. You have a medium risk appetite. You would therefore only invest if your expected profit is quite larger than the cost you need to incur. We recommend you only invest in fertilizer if your expected gross value increase is at least twice as large as the total cost of fertilizer. That means your benefit cost ratio should be at least 2. For every naira invested, you expect to get at least 2 naira in return. If you answer often, then that means you like taking risks. You can afford to invest even if you are not very certain it will pay off. You would therefore only invest if your expected profit is somewhat larger than the cost you need to incur. We recommend you only invest in fertilizer if your expected gross value increase is at least 1.2 times larger than the total cost of fertilizer. That means your benefit cost ratio should be at least 1.2. For every naira invested, you expect to get at least 1.2 naira in return. Let's go back to our example. 3 times the cost is 3 times 12,200 or 36,600. This is still smaller than 59,500. So fertilizer use is recommended even if you are very risk averse. The farmer's worksheet guides you through this calculation as well. Remember, we already calculated the benefit cost ratio in step 4. This was the last row in the table with calculations. We calculated the benefit cost ratio in 4.9. For every naira invested, we can expect almost 5 naira in return. Next, the worksheet allows you to select your risk appetite by asking you again how often you invest in new farm products or technologies. If you don't like taking risks and you rarely invest in new products or technologies, your benefit cost ratio should be at least 2.8 or a rounded 3. The value in our example is 4.9, which exceeds 2.8. This means that fertilizer is highly profitable, and Akilimo recommends to invest if you don't like taking risks. It is a safe investment in your situation. We can now move on to step 5 and look at how to apply fertilizer at the right time. Fertilizer must always be applied when the soils are moist after some rain showers. It is advisable you distribute your fertilizer application across the first 3 months after planting in 2 to 4 doses as the rains allow. Apply the first split within the first month after planting. Spread subsequent splits as rains permit over the next 2 to 3 months. Apply NPK during the first 1 to 2 splits and urea during the later splits. This advice is repeated in the farmer's worksheet. Let's look at our example for our field of a half acre. Remember, the recommended amounts of fertilizer were 50 kg of NPK 15 to 15 to 15 and 30 kg of urea. So when is now the best time to apply this fertilizer? You need to consider how your cassava will grow and how you expect the rains to be distributed. Cassava takes about 12 months to bulk the roots and give a good yield. Fertilizer is best applied in the first 4 months. Let's zoom into these 4 months. When to apply the fertilizer depends on the weather. If you expect ample and regular rainfall, then split and spread the fertilizer application in 3 equal parts. Apply NPK during the first 2 months after planting, and then apply urea in the 3rd month. But if rainfall is less frequent, then apply the fertilizer in just 2 splits. First, apply NPK 15 to 15 to 15 within the first 4 weeks after planting, and then apply the urea within 8 weeks after planting. These are examples, and you can modify these, but remember to apply NPK 15 to 15 to 15 first, and spread subsequent fertilizer applications as much as possible. Only apply fertilizer if the soil is moist and you expect continued rainfall in the weeks after application. Especially with high fertilizer doses, it is important to split and spread application. If rainfall is heavy, avoid applying a lot of fertilizer at a go because then the rain will wash away the nutrients. By spreading fertilizer application, nutrients will be less easily washed away by rain, and fertilizer nutrients will be available when the cassava crop needs them. We can now proceed to the final step. Step 6. Apply fertilizer in the right way. To apply fertilizer correctly, make a 5 cm deep half moon or full ring furrow about 20 cm away from each cassava plant. Spread the required amount of fertilizer in the furrow and cover with soil. This is also summarized in Step 6 on the farmer's worksheet. Apply in a half moon or full ring furrow around each plant and cover with soil. Only apply fertilizer if the soil is moist. Distributing the fertilizer dose equally to all plants is tricky and requires some practice. Using bottle cap measures can assist to get the dosage right. If you plant at 1 meter between rows and 0.8 meters within row, that is 5,000 plants per acre, then 1 bag of fertilizer per acre is about 2 leveled water cups of fertilizer per plant. Let's look at our example for the rate of application for a half of an acre. We obtained the Akilimo recommendation for Boko local government Benue State as 60 kilograms of urea per acre and 100 kilograms of NPK 15 to 15 to 15 per acre. And we have also established that 2 leveled water cups per plant equals about 50 kilograms of fertilizer per acre. So let's see how much this is per plant. You will need to apply 2 leveled water cups of urea fertilizer per plant and 4 leveled water cups of NPK 15 to 15 per plant. But remember that this is approximate. It's important to weigh the amount required for your field. The bottle caps help to distribute it equally to all plants. We can now split the fertilizer application as 2 leveled water cups of NPK 15 to 15 to 15 per plant in the first and second month after planting, and then apply 2 leveled water cups of urea per plant in the 3rd month. That's it. So what have we learned? Let's summarize the 6 steps. Step 1. Apply good agronomic practices. Fertilizer use is only sensible if good agronomic practices are upheld. Practice good land preparation and weed control. Plant disease-free cuttings of improved varieties and plant in lines at the right density. Step 2. Choose the right fertilizer types. Choose fertilizers that provide nitrogen, also known as N, phosphorus, also known as P, and potassium, also known as K, the essential nutrients that cassava requires. We provided recommendations using NPK 15 to 15 to 15 and urea. Step 3. Obtain the recommended fertilizer rate. The recommended rate of fertilizer depends on the soil and weather in your area. We showed how you can obtain the recommended rate of NPK 15 to 15 to 15 and urea for your local government area, your planting month, and your current yield level. Step 4. Do a cost-benefit analysis. You must evaluate the profitability of fertilizer use before deciding to invest. Use your knowledge of how cassava performed in your field previously, the fertilizer price, the expected cassava root price to calculate the expected extra profit. Step 5. Apply fertilizer at the right time. Fertilizer must be applied when the soil is moist, after 1 or 2 rain showers. Urea and NPK 15 to 15 to 15 are best split applied in 2 to 4 equal doses as rains permit. Apply NPK 15 to 15 to 15 during the first 1 to 2 splits and urea during later splits. Step 6. Apply fertilizer in the right way. Apply fertilizer half moon or full ring furrows around each plant. You can use bottle caps to distribute the fertilizer equally to all plants. Now, you know all about Akilimo's tailored fertilizer recommendations for cassava and how to use our printable guides in 6 easy steps. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Akilimo, we know cassava.